Happy birthday again. Did you guys do anything good?
We're gonna just kind of shift my birthday
Yeah,
celebration to the
to a
weekend,
more
and
opportune year.
exactly, it was canceled on a lack of interest.
People don't care about me.
And um and then we just got a starting, I think it's like midnight tonight or something like that, through sometime on Sunday. We have another winter storm warning,
Oh, okay.
and this one's supposedly more snow than the
Mm.
last one,
Mm.
which is funny that it's like you walk around the neighborhood. And so we were on the sunny side of the neighborhood.
Okay.
And weirdly enough, I think I might be like the highest, and I'm using that term loosely, elevation in our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the front yard is facing south. So
Mm.
if we get anything above freezing, my snow's gone.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the neighborhood still have snow.
Mm.
My yard completely clean of snow.
You're not complaining about that, though, I assume.
No, I mean, I'd have to go and scrape it off the other cars that are parked in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Now completely melted off, and the two that we actually use. It's so funny. It's like, I don't know about you, but like we've got our two old cars that we just kept around because we were assuming the boys would want to use them, and they really haven't. And so they really have had like no use over the course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Both of their batteries are dead.
Oh.
And so I'm sure they haven't been turned over in a while, and kind of sucks.
Yeah, I just kind of cycle through the cars when I have to go do something, and
Yeah.
just to keep keep them lubed up.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm probably going to donate one. We've donated old cars in the past, and I've already found out that I'm not going to get much out of the Saturn.
Mm.
So I'm going to probably
I'm
just donate that.
I'm selling cars right now too. I mean, we're just not using them, and I want to do something different. So it is a lot of work to sell them, but
Yeah,
you can
well,
get a little more cash out of it. So
I'm going to keep the Avalon. It does need some service, and I know what it is and everything else. And I'm going to, rather than me doing it myself, which some of it I can do, but then there's like a broken motor mount, and a couple of other things. I'm like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
It's $600. I'll go ahead and have them do it because it'll be a lot easier, and it'll be warranted.
Yeah.
Of all of the things that I've done on vehicles, all of the engine work that I've ever done, I've never pulled the engine, so I've never had to deal with a motor mount,
Mm-hmm.
and I really don't want to.
I totally get it.
I found that there comes an age that if this was like my day-to-day job, sure, but I was shade tree mechanic, and I think it's time for me to hang up my wrenches. Even on my brand new vehicle, I did just switch out like temperature sensor and things like that.
That was a good,
so
that was a good story.
Yeah.
And that made you rethink, why do I do this? Why do I torture myself?
There are other people with better tools and better ways of like doing this, and you sure they're gonna. Actually, I know why I do these things, because they're like, well, Mr. Phelan, it'll cost you $600. I'm like, wait, for a $15 part?
Right.
What?
Yep.
So
we yearn for a simpler time. When cars weren't, right? When they were actually room in the engine bays to do work, and certain things cost a lot less money.
Oh yeah. Funny enough, when I was talking to the guys on the team that are kind of like still left. I mean, I've told you we've been trickling down
right
our people, and so the people who are left, they were like, I can't believe that we've got 1,192 sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started pulling up, like I don't know if you've got, I've got a whole handful of like older like projects from firms that I used to work for that I never worked on. These were like 1920s and stuff like that, but they're like 13 sheets for like almost comparable size projects.
Yeah, right.
And you're like, how the hell did they get away with it? And I was telling him, I'm like, well, if you think about it, I mean, back then they were the site superintendent, the architect was, so
right.
They could basically give you like design intent drawings, because they're going to be working they're going to be on site helping direct the work. There's a good symbiotic relationship between contractor and architect that just doesn't exist anymore. Now it's a very confrontational kind of everybody is trying to like protect their own, and so it's
especially in design bid build delivery method.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and like they were pulling up, stuff. So like, how do we get stuff like this built? And they were pulling up he had documents from this historic high school in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
One, it was enormous. Two, it was beautifully detailed. They're like, how the hell did they get away with 15 sheets? And you're like, one, a lot of repetition, and two, it was just the conversation between the architect and the contractor. They weren't putting in a basis of design and then approved equals.
Yeah.
They were, they were saying, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want. This is what I want. And they'd go out and get it.
Yeah.
And they knew how to put it in.
I was on a YouTube thing yesterday with Jeff Eccles and Catherine McPhail for Context and Clarity Live. It's like a weekly show run out of Gable Media, and it's live streamed to YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitch and all the places. So we had a bunch of people kind of watching and chatting, asking questions from various locations, and it's all kind of coming into this one funnel where we were, so we could respond to questions and kind of keep the conversation going. And one of the topics that came up, I guess, we started to talk about what does the next person in the line need, right? So, and we can put a link to the video in the show notes, but it was, we were kind of talking about it from a technology standpoint, and how I was just kind of pointing out, and I'm sure we talked about it on here before, is that the BIM model it's not the deliverable, right? And so
right.
It's a means to the drawings, and because the agency expects drawings, or maybe just PDFs nowadays, same, interchangeable, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily what the contractor needs, especially during design bid build. It's like these drawings are to get the permit and to CYA and to check all the boxes of kind of what's expected in design bid build delivery process. And instead, we started to talk about, being a trusted piece of the puzzle, and how do you put into a model what a contractor needs to see, because those are different things, right? You're designing this building for agency approval versus designing it for a contractor to be the most useful. Because how many times have we designed something or detailed something and then they never even look at it, right? And it's because the agency needs to see that stuff. They want to check the anchors. They want to see the test reports. They want to see like all this stuff that says that it's going to hold up during whatever event,
right?
Because it's public work. And so it is pretty interesting. You started off by talking about this kind of low trust environment, and that is pretty much what IPD is supposed to solve, right? Or that was the attempt, was to say, we all have a piece of this, and we all have skin in the game throughout the process, and try to solve a lot of these problems before they ever become problems when it costs a lot more to solve them. Let's say it that way.
Right. Yeah.
So instead of doing clash detection, we do clash avoidance. By calling it a different name, it kind of changes the mindset around why you're doing it up front. And you're working through a lot of those issues in 3D to a higher level of detail, which is interesting to think about, because that's kind of, if you kind of boil it down, it's design build, right? Like you're doing just what is necessary to get the thing built. And it reminds me of when I was doing design build with my partner, and we would do the absolute minimum drawings to get the agency approval, because we knew we were going to be figuring stuff out along the way. And so our drawing sets could be a lot lighter, and they just had to meet the requirements. Beyond that, we would do the daily, basically, of here's the problems we're going to solve today. Here's what we're going to build today. How are we going to achieve that together? And granted, like we were doing it ourselves. So we were designing and building, and we weren't working with another entity to fulfill the building part of it. But it still kind of points at that, back to that traditional way of working where you're talking about, where it was figured out enough to get the design intent across, or to get that permit, because it kind of checked the way more limited amount of boxes than there are nowadays. And then they worked through those issues in the field together because they were on the same team, more or less.
So let's kind of use an example today of a conversation that I had that is this clash avoidance, CYA and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking through the details, and we're trying to do our final cleanup for the bid set. It's already gone out for permit, and we noticed that we had a variance in the roof detail that was different from the manufacturer that we were using as our base of design. And then we drew a couple of different sections that had that roof assembly in there. There was enough that was different about it that was, that they were off. And we're like, wait, what's going on? And so, we had this conversation today. We had a nice little open Zoom call, and we started talking about it. And one of the senior guys, he's a building envelope specialist. He was like, well, it needs to do like this and this. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. And I pulled up, I was like, let me share these details. And I'm like, so this is the basis of design, standard manufacturing details. And so they're like, well, why aren't we following those? I'm like, well, that's the question. But I was like, and they were in color, and you could see the difference between like the waterproofing membrane that, went directly above the concrete decking.
Yeah. And
then all of the different stacking and stuff. And so there was two of the different details basically had the waterproofing membrane kind of inverted into two different locations. And it was like, no. It needs to be here, and it needs to follow this because we're using that. And so I started going off on this tangent that you and I have talked about often. Is like, why are we redrawing their details that they've spent a lot of time and money, design and research on doing those drawings? They've spent just a boatload of cash on testing this stuff. So we know that it meets the ASTM requirements that we need for it. Well, why are we going off and doing something else? And it's because of this philosophy of, well, we don't want to sole source something. Oh, sure, we don't want to, but we are doing a base of design, and our specification says approved equals. And if we do approved equals, we can use the base of design details straight out their damn catalog,
right,
plop them into our drawings.
Right. And
as long as they meet that criteria of exactly what we're doing, why are we redrawing them? And they're like, well, that's a good question.
Because we love reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
We love it.
Exactly.
We can't justify spending time to create templates and standards that all of our jobs run off. We'd rather do that every time. and somehow we can justify that.
Yeah. And so it's this, you said it best about like maybe it's just this kind of like mashup of everything. It's where the reason that we don't use that one is because we don't want to be caught out as sole sourcing and doing something.
Something proprietary.
It's not really up to us to determine whether or not they're going to use that detail, because we can draw a detail all the hell we want to.
Yeah. When they substitute, it's going to be
exactly
different.
When they come back with a substitute request, it will be completely different. So why bother?
And you're going to have to figure it out then again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or we're going to have to sit there. Okay, here's the detail they gave us. Here's the detail that we drew. What is the same? What is different? What is right? What is wrong?
Different materials do. Yeah, it's a different assembly. It's going to have to be a different detail. Yeah.
Right. So why do we bother?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we bother going through the effort of spending so much time? Now,
it's complicated, right? Because they're going to come. Insurance is going to come back when you get sued and look at that original detail. And if there's not enough information in there about the waterproofing, then you're going to get sued for that. It totally makes sense, right?
Yeah,
and yet it doesn't.
There's an ongoing issue that we have on a detail that we drew for an all glass storefront system with glass sliders. And we designed it one way based off of the manufacturer's materials. And basically we followed their exact details. We didn't want to redraw it. And so we basically just took their details that they provided us based off of our constraints that we had, and they developed some details for us, and we used them. And then there was a submittal, and the submittal was different from the details. And then what was installed was different from the submittal.
Of course.
Now, the submittal never had a substitution request. So then what was
how did it get
installed?
Approved? Who approved it?
That's a longer conversation.
Yeah, totally.
About different liabilities and having local architects versus design architects and everything else. And so, but And so now, the system keeps failing. The door hardware is not the right hardware for this particular, glazing system. The roller tracks and everything else. There's acoustic properties that weren't followed. There's all sorts of different problems that we have with it. And so it's you come back and you say, well, who's at fault? Who's at fault? Because what we designed, and then even if they would have followed what we approved, it would have been better than what was installed. And so the question is well, why did they change what we even approved? Now, what we approved probably was a little bit more deficient than what we designed, but again, it was still a system that at least met most of the minimum criteria of what was designed. So, so you're just like,
what a cluster.
Yeah. So even when you go through this effort of drawing, I guess to bring it home, it was like, even when you go through this effort of trying to draw something, when somebody can see a way to save a buck or something like that on a project, you kind of get caught out with, okay, you changed everything. And if they, I don't want to say too much because it's an ongoing problem, but it is just a problem that when you go through all of this effort and then they decide to do something differently, you basically say, why bother? And I guess that's kind of like the whole point of where I was going.
Yeah, totally.
Like, why bother going through all of this effort? If you're going to say, I'm going to use a basis of design, and you can take that basis of design, you can overlay it onto your specific condition, but you're not really changing anything from that. Why go any further than that? Mm-hmm. Or if you're going to do a typical detail, well, then do a typical detail off of your typical manufacturer. Yeah. And I am absolutely doing an air quote right now.
Yeah, right.
Because, it's just completely frustrating because, then you get into this point. It's just like, okay, who's to blame when something goes wrong? Mm-hmm. And then it goes back to what you and I were talking about is the CYA and which just goes back to the 13 drawings where we could easily control it by just standing there and they say, okay, Mr. Architect, this is what we're going to put in. This is what you drew. This is what we're going to put in. Does that work? Meh, no. Or yeah.
Yeah.
And you're literally standing there.
Not that it could be solved right then and there anyway, right? Like, I think that's the other part of it is when these changes are implemented and then there's this kind of trickle down effect that happens that is nobody can foresee because there's so many interdependencies upon things in these complex assemblies, right? So a minor thickness changes something down the line, right? A different assembly like procedure changes means and methods. Like it doesn't just affect the architect. It could also affect the contractor. It could also affect the overall outcome. And that's the hard part. That's why so much time does need to be spent up front kind of solving all of those issues, and the manufacturer's details are never going to cover all of the potential that their material could be used. True. So a lot of times you are kind of ripping this detail apart and combining it with another one and coming up with a third custom one or a fourth or a fifth, depending on even just walking around the building, you could have different configurations. So it's so complicated, right? It's so complicated. And because we sell a service and we sell hours, the incentive is always to shortchange that because the less hours are better, right? That's the incentive is to take shortcuts. And that's where these problems come from. So man, what a chicken and the egg.
Right.
Total cluster. Dude. Brutal. So we took Freddie in. Yeah. Freddie update. So the Freddie update is that, now it was a week later, we took him to our vet, was checking him out and everything else. And, he seemed to be doing a lot better with the leg than we thought. And so, that's good news. She wants to kind of continue to monitor him before she does her final ruling on whether or not he needs surgery or not. And, because of his size and everything else, he does have a little bit of time to wait because, he's just a little small 9-pound dog. So we get him from the rescue 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. And they weren't quite sure of their age. They were kind of guessing, could be almost 4. Well, they're like, well, first thing we want to tell you is Freddie's not 4. Like, oh, okay. Freddie's closer to 7. Like, wait, what? And the reason that we know that is because he's got really bad dental problems. You're like, okay,
well, what do we do about those? And like, well, that's the next problem. And I'm like, okay, what's the next problem? Well, we noticed that Freddie has a heart murmur, and we're worried about, we have for what we have to do for his dental problems, we have to basically knock him out. We have to give him a sedative, and we're not quite sure how he would react to putting to a sedative with a heart murmur. And so we're suggesting that you take him to a doggy cardiologist. I'm like, what?
Wait, what just happened? What just happened?
I brought him in for you guys to check out his leg, and now you're telling me that we've got
God.
like this broke ass dog. Which, of course, we're going to do whatever it takes, for him, because
oh man,
3 months or not, he's our family now, and it's going to be what it's going to be. But
wow,
like, I just, so I'm sitting there. We're both, my daughter and I are sitting out in the car waiting outside, because that's what you do nowadays when you drop your dogs off at the vet. You sit outside and wait for them to call you up on the phone so that you can have a phone conversation with the doctor. And so she's telling me all of these things, and my daughter's like frantically like searching up what does heart murmur mean and all of these other things on her phone. And she, like her eyes are getting like big and everything else. And, and of course, as we said before, it's like, what are we going to say? Nah, I think we're getting to a point where we just, nah, we're good.
Mm-hmm.
No, just
let him live.
Okay. You're like, okay, just tell me. So we're thinking that little boy had a really hard life before he made it to the animal rescue. And so, however, I don't want to say it this way because it sounds so weird and morbid, but however long the little boy's got on this earth, we're going to make him completely forget about what happened to him in the past. But my God, he must have been like seriously neglected.
Wow. Yeah, it's not hard
just
to
really
imagine.
sucks.
It does. Yeah. It's probably more typical than anybody wants to admit.
Yeah. I mean, my gosh, my friend, working with him for 8 years now. And when he met his now wife, she was into volunteering for the animal rescue. And so now they just both got into it like big time. And so it's almost as demanding as both of their jobs. She's a teacher, he's an architect,
wow.
And so, and they're, and so like some of the stories of some of these dogs that they get are just absolutely horrible. And now they personally have 5 dogs.
Whoa.
But 3 of the 5 of them are rescue dogs.
Mm.
And it's in the stories and in like,
oh, I can't.
Oh my God, it is disgusting what people do to animals out there. And it's just, it was gruesome.
Yeah, I bet. What a downer.
Didn't mean to end it this way.
Well, it seems like you guys can actually make it better for Freddie. That's good.
Oh yeah, we're making it better for Freddie.
Yeah.
Freddie's, he was so skinny, and like his fur was so matted and like just he was covered in filth. Mm-hmm. And so the people who had taken him in basically completely shaved him, not quite bald, but like down to nothing. And so he looked like so he had like a little fuzzy head and like a naked body.
But made him look young.
And he was so skinny, and now he's like filled out, and he's got his fur back, and he looks good and healthy. And so his life is vast improvement.
Way better.
Yes.
Wow.
So if you're out there and you're thinking about rescuing a dog, do it. Seriously, do it.
Do it.